Nick and Laura are coming home for their baby's birth, so Antonio told me I need to leave. Leave? I asked in disbelief. Antonio nodded with a smirk. I've always thought life would be better without you. I hate how you always argue and act like you're right. There are other women besides you. Just because we've been together for years doesn't mean we need to stay together, he said boldly. I couldn't believe his words. Whatever struggles Antonio faces now are his problem, not mine. He might think he can't just forget what he said after some sleep, but not this time. He needs to take responsibility. I'm Scarlett, 55 years old, and I live with my husband Antonio, who's 65. He recently retired and said he'd spend time enjoying fishing. At first, he seemed happy, but after retiring, things changed. I run a small clothing company that makes enough for us to live comfortably in a nice condo. Antonio used to be supportive, but retirement brought a different side of him. His days became aimless. He stayed up late watching TV, slept in, and had no plans. When I suggested keeping a regular schedule, especially at his age, he brushed me off. I've worked hard all my life. Let me be, he snapped. He also became bored and started criticizing me. I'm busy with work, so I use modern appliances to help with chores. But Antonio didn't like it. Robots can't clean properly. Do it by hand, he insisted. He even complained about meals, saying stews need attention, not an electric cooker. When I pointed out that he had time to do these things, he snapped. Just because you work doesn't make you better than me. I started to understand why people get divorced later in life, but I stayed, remembering our years together until things got worse. Our son, Nick, and his wife, Laura, announced they were having a baby. Nick isn't my biological son. Antonio had him in a previous marriage, but I raised him since he was 10. Antonio was over the moon about the baby, our first grandchild, he said excitedly. Laura, raised by a single mom, said she wanted to go back to her mom's place for the birth since her mom was busy with work. Antonio got very involved, insisting we prepare everything for their stay. He gave me a long list of things to do: buy a crib, stock up on diapers, and get milk. But no matter how much I tried to help, it wasn't good enough. Not like that. Do it properly, he would say. Finally, I snapped. If you're so excited, why don't you do it yourself? I'm already busy. Antonio frowned, shocked. Then he lashed out. You're acting so cold because Nick isn't your real son. You don't care. His words hurt deeply. That's not true. Don't say such awful things. You're overdoing it. And if Laura sees this, she might not even want to come here, I said firmly. Antonio stood there, speechless and frustrated. Antonio stormed off to his room, clenching his teeth. I felt a mix of anger and regret. I didn't mean for things to escalate so much, but his obsession over Nick and Laura had pushed me too far. Being accused of not caring about Nick just because I wasn't his biological mother hurt deeply. I wanted Nick and Laura to feel comfortable here, which was why I had to stop Antonio's over-the-top behavior. The next morning, I tried to apologize, but Antonio stayed in his room. I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm going now, I said softly before leaving for work. That day at work was tough, and I came home late. I was exhausted and still needed to make dinner. As I walked in, Antonio was already sitting at the dining table, waiting. I'm sorry I'm late. I'll make dinner quickly, I said, hurrying to the kitchen. Antonio didn't reply. He just sat there, staring at me, making me feel rushed and pressured. He could have made dinner himself since he was home all day, but instead, he just waited. I quickly whipped up crispy fish sandwiches and brought them to the table. Sorry for the wait. Let's eat, I said. Antonio ate in silence, finishing his sandwich before I was even halfway through mine. Then he sat up straight and stared at me. What? I asked, confused. You neglect the housework because you're always working, he said in a low, accusing voice. What? That's not true, I exclaimed, almost dropping my sandwich. Just sandwiches, no salad or soup. That's unacceptable, he continued. I only made sandwiches because you looked so hungry and I wanted to hurry, I explained, frustrated. But Antonio wasn't satisfied. You always argue with me. You must think you're better than me because you work and I'm retired, he snapped. That's not how I think at all, I said firmly, but he didn't believe me. I was tired of the pointless argument. Let's stop this. Nick and Laura will be here soon, and we don't want them walking into this kind of atmosphere. Antonio sneered sarcastically. I've already thought of a solution. Nick and Laura are coming back for the baby, so you should leave. I was stunned. Leave? Are you serious? Antonio nodded with a smirk. Things would go smoother without you. I've always thought so. I hate people like you who always argue with logic. There are plenty of other women. I was speechless. After decades of marriage, he said such cruel things. He didn't stop there. You don't respect me. You're always complaining and bossing me around. Just leave. I don't even want to see your face, he shouted, slamming the table. I had heard enough. Understood, I said calmly and went to my room. The next morning, I called a moving company. After being treated like that, I wasn't going to stay. Luckily, it wasn't a busy season, and I was able to schedule everything quickly. My plan was to move out while Antonio was out of the house, but he was almost always home. I worried until fate intervened. I'm going fishing with some friends tomorrow, Antonio announced later that day. Acting as if nothing had happened, he seemed to want to forget his harsh words, as he always did. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. While he was gone, I packed up everything I wanted, including the furniture and appliances, and moved to a new place. A work acquaintance had kindly offered to let me stay in their new property. It was perfect. The night I moved, Antonio called. I answered, expecting his reaction. Scarlett, what's going on? He asked, panicked. What do you mean? I replied calmly. My house is empty. What happened? Well, I said, you told me to leave, so I did. Antonio stammered, but I didn't mean for you to take everything. I couldn't help but smile. His harsh words had freed me from a marriage I had grown tired of, and for once, I felt no regrets. It's crazy that you took everything from the house, Antonio shouted over the phone. What's crazy? Leaving it all behind would have been ridiculous. I bought those things with my own money. You never contributed. Remember, you always said you didn't need them, I replied. Antonio went silent for a moment before grumbling. Fine, Nick and his family are coming tomorrow. The furniture doesn't matter. Good, then it's perfect timing. Say hi to Nick for me, I said, ending the conversation quickly. There was one other important issue, but Antonio didn't seem to know about it yet, so I decided not to mention it. The next day, Nick called. We'll be there soon, he said. Didn't Antonio tell you? I've moved out, I replied. Nick sounded surprised but not upset. Oh, really? He said, almost with relief. Cool, if Mom's not there, we can do whatever we want then. You're not coming back, right? That's right, I confirmed. Nick had always seemed a bit distant toward me, maybe because I wasn't his biological mother. He'd once told me, you're not as kind as other women. I tried to raise him with love and discipline so he'd grow up strong, but he never seemed to appreciate it. Well, that's easier for both of us. Laura always felt uncomfortable too. So, see you, Nick said, throwing in an unnecessary comment just like his father often did. After hanging up, I couldn't help but feel on edge. I have expected a call from Antonio or Nate about the furniture or appliances, especially since Laura had once commented on how nice it was to have everything for an easy life, but no call came that day. At the end of the month, Antonio finally called. His voice lacked its usual confidence. Scarlett. Yes, I replied calmly, already guessing what he wanted. It's about the rent, he began hesitantly. What about it? Antonio and I had been paying $1,700 a month for the condo rent, but I had always covered the full amount. Antonio, now retired, couldn't possibly afford it on his own for long. He probably realized he was in trouble. You're not expecting me to pay the rent for a place I don't even live in, are you? I asked, cutting straight to the point. No, that's not, Antonio stammered. You were the one who insisted I leave. Remember, now you're calling me for help, I added. Antonio's pride wouldn't let him admit he was struggling, so he quickly changed the subject. Scarlett, are you doing okay? You know, with a place to live? Yes, I found a place through some connections. I'm living comfortably, I said firmly, making it clear I wasn't coming back. Oh, okay. Nick and Laura were saying they miss you. I thought maybe you'd consider coming back, he said awkwardly. That was unusual for Antonio, but I could tell he was desperate. Really, I thought they didn't like me, I replied with a hint of sarcasm, leaving no room for negotiation. No, that's not. Well, it doesn't matter. I have something important to discuss, so I'll come over, Antonio said. Yes, there's something important to discuss for my future, I replied. All right, I'll be waiting, he said, sounding cheerful. Later, I visited the condo for the first time in a while. Antonio greeted me at the door, unnecessarily dressed up. No matter how nice he tried to look, it didn't change anything. Walking into the living room, I saw Nick and Laura sitting on new sofas by the new table, with a new fridge in the kitchen. Clearly, they couldn't live without furniture. Nick waved casually, and Laura, though glaring, muttered a tense greeting. The atmosphere was heavy, and I wanted to get straight to the point. I settled it down as Antonio urged me to. So, what did you want to talk about? He asked. Grateful he brought it up, I got straight to the matter. I think it's better to handle this sooner rather than later, I said, holding out a set of divorce papers. Antonio's face turned pale. You're planning to divorce me, he stammered, visibly shaken. Yes, ever since you told me to leave, I've been planning this. Did you really say all that without thinking? Antonio fell silent, his expression guilty. He likely remembered. He had a bad habit of blurting things out without considering the consequences. This had even caused him trouble at work before. The last time we fought, you said awful things like, I don't want to see your face, and there are other women. After that, I couldn't imagine a future with you anymore. Antonio kept his head down, sweating. Yeah, I said it, but that's not really what I meant. You said those things even if you didn't mean them. I'm appalled, I said, my voice calm firm, but it doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm done. Antonio looked up, our eyes meeting. I'm shocked. I can't do this anymore, I said, leaving no room for discussion. Antonio immediately flinched and looked away. Can't you reconsider? We've come so far together, he said weakly. I've come this far only to hear things like that from you. I can't do this anymore. I can't stay with you, I replied firmly. Antonio let out a long, defeated sigh. The room fell into an awkward silence so thick it was hard to breathe. Surprisingly, it was Laura who broke the silence. Excuse me, but I'm the one who's been most inconvenienced here. I turned to her, tilting my head in confusion. She glared at me with resentment. What do you mean? I asked. I thought this place would be perfect with you. Around clean, organized, and full of fancy appliances. I came here expecting to be pampered, but instead, I'm stuck in this marital drama. It's a huge nuisance, Laura complained, sighing loudly, even louder than Antonio. Her words left me baffled. If she was so unhappy, why didn't she just leave? That's a big misunderstanding. If you don't like it, you could go back to your own place or anywhere else, I said plainly. Laura's face turned red with anger. What's with that attitude? I came all the way here for you. I never asked you to come, I shot back. Her breathing became heavy, and she looked like she was about to explode. I had such high hopes after talking to Antonio, and now this, it's too much. She finally burst into tears. Nick tried to comfort her, but it was clear the situation made no sense. Laura's unrealistic expectations explained Antonio's excessive enthusiasm about their visit. He'd likely been swept up in her fantasies of being treated like royalty, but none of that mattered now. Laura was inconsolable, and Antonio just sat there, frowning and sweating. I decided there was no point in staying any longer. There's no use staying here. I'll leave, and we can't settle the divorce through lawyers, I said, standing up. Before I could go, Nick shouted, You're running away. You're abandoning your responsibilities and causing trouble. I frowned, stunned by the absurdity of his accusation. Approaching Nick, who was sitting beside Laura, I looked down at him. What's wrong with you? How old are you now? I'm 35, he muttered. I took a deep breath and glared at him. Then, what responsibilities do you think I have? Taking care of a 35-year-old son and his wife, or a 60-year-old husband? Nick's eyes widened, and he was speechless. I couldn't hold back any longer. You're all adults. Enough is enough. Who's really causing trouble here? Using my efforts as a stepping stone, while expecting me to always smile and comply. Where does it end? The room went silent. My words hung in the air, undeniable. It was time to walk away for good. Calm down, man. Don't act like a child now, Nick said. His dismissive tone made me even more frustrated. I had been shouting so much that I was out of breath. I paused, taking a deep breath to calm myself. Nick, I said, my voice softer now. I always cared about you. I raised you as my own, but maybe I failed to show you that. Nick opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. He just sat there, silent. I grabbed my things and left the room quickly. No one tried to stop me. Later, Antonio agreed to the divorce without any arguments. He didn't ask for alimony and mentioned that he'd have to move out since he couldn't afford the condo on his own. I knew living alone would be hard for him. He'd never done housework before. Through the lawyer, Antonio sent me a letter in his familiar handwriting. It simply said, "Thank you for everything." He had tried to reconcile, but I firmly refused. After that, he seemed depressed. Nick and Laura decided to move back to Laura's family home. Laura complained about it, but Nick managed to convince her. After the divorce, Nick called me once. "I'm sorry for everything. I'll try to be a better parent like you were," he said shyly. Maybe Nick hadn't disliked me as much as I thought. I ended up buying the house I was renting and still live here. Work is going well, and although I was tired right after the divorce, I now feel refreshed. It's nice not having to take care of anyone anymore. I'm not sure how many years I have left to work, but I plan to do my best while also enjoying my private life. Deep down, I still wish for Nick's happiness.